Yeah, those are all very clear things right now. Let's actually get into the series. Starting off on Golden Aura for game one. In the top left, we do have Team Liquid's Clem.
And the bottom right in the blue, looking to continue what's already been a really nice run for him. For Na'Vi, it's Spirit.
Still so cool we can say that.
Right?
Na'Vi, Cloud9. Pretty cool.
I'm on Cloud9 about it.
Ha! Ha! Whatever. I would have Navi... No, it doesn't work. Anywho.
You're born to make a winning joke about it.
Sure. Anyway, so TVT, not looking so hot for Spirit. And this is where we go back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the day. If you guys missed it, we're kind of looking over the entire bracket, but I was trying to correctly explain that you can really look at Clem versus Spirit over the last few years, and you can use that particular matchup to see just how much Clem has improved. Because even though Clem has always, or pretty much always, been favored versus Spirit in this matchup, the way the games look and how one-sided they are get, depressingly, worse, I guess, for Spirit as the years go by, or as particularly the last year has gone by, which is that, a lot of them were just like, oh, well, TVT, right? Some bad engagements there, some good engagements over there. He's a little bit better in late game, you're a little bit better in early game, whatever it was. It was still kind of a contest, or kind of interesting to think of what could happen. But then there have been a string in the last year, maybe even year plus at this point, of Clem absolutely dominating any European Terran that goes up against him. And many Korean Terrans as well, but probably not the very, very top, right? Hardly dominates them a lot of the time. But when it comes to those European Open Cups, whenever he faces a Terran, it's like, forget about it. Because basically at this point, Clem is the de facto winner, as long as like Cyril doesn't sign up, or Max Pax doesn't have one of his hot weeks, I guess, where he does defeat Clem. So it's just, you can see how much it goes from two people who are pretty good at TVT, one person being less confident in TVT, but again, growing in confidence and then growing in lethality. Clem has become such a lethal player, and you can really see that in the last year of TVTs, particularly against Spirit, where more and more of his games would end sub 5 minutes because his Reaper Cyclone micro would be just that freaking good. So, yeah, this has been a, I want to say it's not special to me because it's like a weird way to put it, but it was really a joy to watch Clem improve in this matchup and get so confident and so lethal in it when it was his main problem. Of course, on the opposite side, that means that Spirit just has even more troubles against this guy. Gets harder and harder every day to defeat Clem.
I guess the one saving grace you talk about Clem being lethal. Sub 5 minute games all over the place. The Cyclones have been nerfed, thank goodness. They've been reverted back to kind of how they were, a little bit tankier, but certainly they don't quite as much benefit from the aggressive hot pickup micro because they don't have, there's actually a cooldown to their lock-on again, thank goodness, which means that while Clem absolutely is incredible, I mean, it's fun just watching Clem play because you just get to see things that no one else can do, and you're like, well, this doesn't look fair, but we can enjoy it, right? Yeah, it's a lot of fun, but at the very least, that the fact that was making Clem probably the best TVT player in the world in the last patch because no one could touch his Cyclone micro, at least that has been tuned down a little bit.
Yeah, that is true, but I am still looking to see what he can do with the micro here as he does drop. Spirit is totally prepared for this, has his units in position, but grenades kind of just threw the wrench there. That's, I think, the only reason that even looked contests. Otherwise, it looked like Spirit was way too well prepared for it. So Clem not going to find a lot of damage from this. He also didn't find a lot of scouting. I know we've been talking about not build orders the entire time, but quickly to go over it. Banshees. Banshees are on the way for Spirit as Clem continues to rally all of his units across the field. Vikings coming out as well. Actually, a very aggressive opener in TVT that is not typically to be done, I guess, professionally. But, the idea is that this gets started so early on with such a powerful unit, the tank, that if you don't deal with it correctly from the get-go, you just don't deal with it. But the Banshees really should throw a problem in here as far as the defense goes. They could be used defensively, sure, but then also they could kill a lot of SCVs if they circumvent this army.
The question is how much damage can Clem get done before that happens? Because with this, you talk about this build, we don't see it all that often. I think part of it is just the map. It's pretty good on Golden Aura with that spot. You can kind of wedge the tanks in just north of the natural. on over to the right side. So we're going to see supply depots go down. Spirit, yeah, he's got 2 Banshees out. That's really important. But he is supply block, 62 out of 62. I think he had to drop a top hat to make sure that something happened. So Clem's going to continue to grow into this game in a way that Spirit not really going to be able to do so. But remember, also most of his anti-airs on the other side. Do we have scans? There's none in the main base. There's no missile turret either. Clem, no scans in the natural either. This is what Spirit was looking for. But Clem says, okay, that's fine. I can't mind. Let me see if I can kill you. And for now, a tank instead. Natural's going to get posted up a little bit on. But again, with 9 SCVs going down, Zombie Grub, how much can Clem get done here on the other side?
He's still dangerously close to winning this game. So the Banshees are making this more of a problem, but then maybe they should have been used, I guess, partially defensively. Obviously, you don't want to just throw 2 Banshees into a scan against 4 Vikings, but I don't know. I guess you would have had to gotten lucky on the timing, whether they were defensive or offensive, and whether or not a mule had been dropped. 17 SCVs just simply might not be enough. It sounds like a tremendous amount because usually it would be, but it's only a 7-worker difference. Yet Clem is mining off of all 3 bases at this point. Third almost completed, and Spirit just had to lift his natural. So, like I was saying, if you deal with this immediately somehow, that would be the best possible scenario. Good for you. No problem. But if that tank gets in position, the Vikings start rallying forward, more tanks start coming, they start getting into even more abusive positions, taking care of your own ramp against you, then you, absolutely can die. And there is a defensive Banshee finally showing some merits. So a couple of tanks going down because of the scans. There we go, not being available. But that is a bit of a one-trick pony, isn't it? Now Clem will have scans, especially with a 3rd orbital potentially in play.
That being said, Clem has really been struggling with scans this entire game. And you talk about that scan, it was just about the least useful scan possible because the Banshee was at like 1 energy left. It was going to go down in half a second anyways. Of course, Clem couldn't know that. But that does, again, you just talk about minor bits of value. Clem is still massively ahead of this game. I'm not trying to make any ifs, ands, or buts about it. But knocking down a couple of those tanks, they do make life a little bit easier. If another Banshee can show up, maybe Clem not going to have a scan available for now. Spirit tries to run down the ramp. Zombie Grub, this is not going to work. Clem, he's played a masterful game. Great push. You said 3-5 minutes. He's going to do it in 8. Close enough.
Yeah. And like I was trying to say, this doesn't necessarily happen all that often, and I'd still stick to that. But obviously, if you can get the correct sequence of events, then it is very powerful. You know, if we see something kind of more dedicated like that in the early game, sometimes it's that old 2 starport build that felt like it came and went, you know? But it is the same idea, obviously, which is just that you are going to build tanks fairly quickly. You are going to build reactored Vikings as opposed to your typical Ravens and TVT. And you are going to particularly find a place to lodge your tanks. That's the real trick to this, is finding a really abusive lodging place. And that's what he did. And that starts with the medevac drop as well. The medevac drop ensures that the defensive units of the other Terran is back at home, maybe dealing with it, maybe being in the main base as opposed to the natural. And then, you know, if they do try and get some revenge, maybe it's not fast enough. Maybe suddenly there's a tank on the forefront and they can't do anything about it. So you just feel trapped. You feel utterly and totally trapped the entire game. I'm sure Spirit did.
Yeah, it's also one of those things, right, where Spirit did open a little bit differently than a lot of Terrans would do. You open up, sure, Starport Tech Lab, fine, but there's no Raven, right? There's no interference matrix, maybe. Depends on how you want to open. Going Banshees, it represents a lot of damage, and we saw it. You can maybe use it defensively, but it also is a much more exploitable tech path. There's a reason that we see Ravens 80%, I don't know, maybe 80% of games in TVT, right? Maybe even more than that, because it gives you offensive potential. It does give you defensive potential. It's not quite as all or nothing to a scan or a defensive Raven as Banshees are. And I like the idea from Spirit, right? Like, you know that Illegal Act gives you a 92% chance to win this series. Sure. You know that you have not been doing all that well against Clem recently, so don't play a straight-up TVT. Don't play the game that Clem is the most comfortable in playing on the vague hope that maybe today he's in a funk because he lost to Firefly a little bit earlier today. I joked about that. Clearly, this is the matchup that matters. So, yeah, do something a little bit different. Give yourself a little bit different of a win condition. I like the idea. Unfortunately for Spirit, didn't work out in game 1, but Zombie Grub, we got game 2. Alcyon is here.
Yep, and now this guy is up 1. He is the Team Liquid player, Clem.
And in the bottom left, in the blue, I like the idea. Play something a little bit different. Unfortunately, game 1, it definitely didn't work out. Now he's down 1. It's Spirit.
I do agree. I like the change-up. The surprise Banshee can work, absolutely, especially in perhaps a more typical game in which 2 Banshees even pair up together and then just try and go ham before the Raven and Cyclone catches them. Because that's kind of the big reason why it's really fallen out, is that the Raven Cyclone is now a default opener and then obviously deals with Banshees very well. But the other reasons I would say is people just got better at kind of determining how they can execute something against the Banshees, like Clem did, right? So he had a problem against the Banshees defensively, but he saw an opportunity to still be aggressive, which maybe in 2012, one Banshee uncloaked appears in your SCV line. You're like, oh God, I guess I'm over. I guess I'm dead. Because we're all so much worse back then. But no, he does it very, very well. And the Banshees are worth it, but they are, as I was saying, like a one-trick pony, and I was saying that in particular in the game, but they can also kind of be that in a series for TVT. I mean, it's a best of 5. All 5 games happen. Of course, we could see other Banshees arrive, but they're really not the most common. So I certainly think that both players are going to play away from that, although Clem has a lot of freedom, I guess, as the guy now that's up 1 and also has the history against Spirit, so he could do whatever the heck he wants. But Clem usually likes the non-Banshee micro units, I guess. He'll definitely be as aggressive as he can with whatever units you give him, but person being a Banshee player, not too often, I'd say.
It's kind of funny. You talk about, back in 2012, 1 Banshee in the mineral line, I guess I'm dead. I remember it being fun, like, talking about, gas first versus whatever. He's got to get an eBay now because it's not gas first and there's a Banshee on the way. And like, okay, well, you just drop a scan. It's going to be okay. Obviously, balance was different. Economy scaled differently. It was a very different game. But the other thing that people would talk about back, it's like, man, Banshee micro, he's able to move and like, this is pretty good. And now we look at it, it's like, yeah, no, the Banshee's not microable enough for Clem. Sure, you can micro it fine, but it's not flashy enough. And it's funny how far we've come.
Yeah, it really isn't. It's really not. Well, we got ourselves some typical TVT openers here. No one trying to be particularly aggressive. I could absolutely see Clem try and finalize the series with a non-proxy 2-Rex. Actually, he's not super big on the proxy 2-Rex, so really dedicate and potentially quote unquote throw away a game because your opponent's properly defended. But he does do the 2-Rex opener or the 1 proxy. Not this game. It's just going to be the typical opener for Clem. Cyclone might have been changed, but the micro ability of the Medivac Cyclone combination has not changed. It's still freaking good. And then because the last game was so successful, he might try and do the similar follow-up. It's one thing leads to another. No matter what Clem is choosing to do, that is usually what happens. His initial micro is impressive, applaud it, but it didn't do a whole lot. Well, it might not have, but then it opened up an opportunity to do something else because the guy is so worried about defending against it. So, then you can sneak a tank all the way across the map before Spirit has anything to do about it. But Spirit is going for a different opener himself. That is actually the same opener, kind of as Clem. Medivac coming out, but a lot later. He does have a tank. That's great. That's wonderful. It's going to be out of position.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw this, Zombie Grub, but even the Starport was a lot later for Spirit than it was for Clem in this game. I didn't quite see why, whether he got cast or got something else, but at the end of the day, it means that this Medivac is pretty much on the other side of the map by the time that Spirit's first Medivac is out. And if you go for a Medivac, as we see Clem doing here, you want to get aggressive on it. So being forced to get pinned back home like this, losing a supply depot, not the end of the world. Spirit's not going to get supply blocked, but he does have to drop another couple ones. It does mess with his setup just a little bit. Hey, one supply depot, maybe not the end of the world. A couple more, maybe a little bit worse, or a couple SCVs. So Clem, we talked about this, the micro ability of a Medivac, the ability to dodge shots, pick up, drop down, move around, exactly in his wheelhouse. Already, it's not the biggest of deals, certainly not, but he's already starting to get a little bit of something.
This is interesting from Spirit. So first of all, Clem, he's going into Ravens, not Vikings, so definitely not the same thing as last game. Spirit obviously doing the same, Ravens, not Banshees. But what's interesting about Spirit's opener is that he got a tank. So he had a Cyclone and a tank from the factory, whereas Clem had a couple of Hellions and a Cyclone. So he had his tank production started up much faster, and if he continued with it, he would have kept the 1 tank lead. He used the factory as an add-on user. I use a different word when I'm on my stream. But anyways, he used it for add-ons. And that's great and all, but that does mean the tank count will go ahead and even up again, or actually even be in Clem's favor. There we go. But he does get faster stim, so it's just an interesting modification, because then it's apparent that he wanted to get a faster tank to feel a lot of safety, and actually had no purpose in the defense of the initial attack. So that's kind of It's just kind of funny, just kind of a unique thing. Obviously, we're going to get into Bio, Tank, Raven. Our typical TVT mid-game is absolutely on the way. No one has made amazing strides, get ahead of anyone else. We have Clem slightly ahead in the workers, great. Kind of a little bit behind in the orbital. so few seconds of difference here. And then maybe the stim is the biggest difference. Spirit's hopping off and on has given a much faster stim, slower tank production. A much faster stim means much faster combat shields, more Marines, and he could do a lot with that. But we're gonna have to wait. We're waiting a little while, actually.
It's always interesting when you talk about Marines can do a lot. Years past, you would talk about, oh wow, this 1-1 versus 0-0, 2-2 versus 1-1, and you know, on the one hand, it's still just about as impactful as it was if you can fight Marines versus Marines. But Terran players have gotten so good at recognizing, okay, I'm down in upgrade timing a little bit, because Spirit's gonna have like a 15-second window. Not massive, but maybe it might time out really nicely with combat shields. We're gonna have to see. Regardless, Terran players are so good at realizing, okay, I don't have my upgrade yet. I'm just gonna sit behind my tank line, or I'm going to siege up with my tank line, and I'm just not gonna give you this opportunity to go take advantage of the fact that your Marines are almost infinitely better than mine. And then you add anti-armor missiles as well, and things get really interesting. But even if Spirit has this Marine tech lead with stim and combat shields and everything else, it's kind of funny. We don't really see this really matter. It can matter in TVT, but we don't really see it matter all that much. But Spirit, for now, he's moving down the map. Let's see what he gets done.
It's always worth noting these upgrade discrepancies, but yeah, you're right. There's been a real change here that if you get the third CC, if you both get the third CC, it is extremely difficult to kill each other, even with these timing. You know, it often would not even be the upgrade timing that kills Clem, for instance, in this game. It would be the fact that he doesn't realize the attack is coming from the left side as opposed to the right side. That would usually be much more of a killer. But we absolutely should be paying attention to the upgrades, because there are still a couple of highlight games where that is the reason someone wins or breaks through a defensive tank line. And that's what Spirit certainly would have been wanting to hope for, but he finds absolutely no wiggle room. He doesn't get a surprise on his opponent. He doesn't get the medevac drop on the right side surprise of his opponent. And actually, as he decides to retreat, Clem is the one pushing out. And the upgrades will be completely even. Even though Spirit's well on his way to 2-2, that's fantastic, good for you, and the armory's late for Clem, not gonna help you. And now your army's just out of position, trying to come back. Lickety Split is kind of here on time. Raven's really helping out with the matrices on all of the tanks of Clem. Is that going to be enough? Anti-armor missile now on both players. All the tanks, all but one, were disabled for the entirety of that fight. The last one only getting one shot. And that was not the break that Clem was hoping for. It was dangerously close to being so, wasn't it? Spirit was barely on time for the defense.
One of the big benefits of what was happening with Spirit there is he had that big drop on the third base. And we were talking about how, well, Clem's not getting, or Spirit's not getting a lot done with this. He gets that drop in, he gets 9 SCVs, and all of a sudden, maybe he pulls SCVs anyways, but you feel so much better about doing that. Because you just got a ton of workers on your opponent's third. So yeah, you know, I lose a couple, really not that big of a deal. I'm still gonna have that lead. And now we talk about upgrades. We talk about 2-2, 1-1 was very close. The Spirit couldn't hit that timing. Clem's armory was much later than it should have been. So that 10, 15 second gap, whatever it was, between Spirit and Clem hitting that 1-1, all of a sudden it's a 30-second window. All of a sudden these Marines are gonna be stronger than Clem's for a much longer in this game. Now, 4 bases, really hard to attack into, a little bit easier than 3. But the question now is Spirit has this much larger of a gulf on his upgrade leads. Can he take advantage of it? Other thing to point out, by the way, never mind, we could say Ravens went down for one side, not the other, but no, they both have 2. So they do have that.
So one died.
One died.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Spirit is in a good position. There is no doubt about that. He has a much faster 4th base because it was on location. Oh, just lost a tank there. He has the much faster upgrades, but it is a now 4 base versus 4 base TVT, and again, it is extremely difficult to kill each other at this point. The upgrades are going to matter a lot until they all equalize, and this is one of the reasons we don't have 4-4, 5-5, 6-6, and 7-7, because that would make comebacks even harder to do. But comebacks are actually very exciting and very cool in StarCraft 2, so we want a little bit of that. And that's what Clem is eventually going to get to. I actually have a lot of faith in that. Spirit is very good in a macro game. He has worked a lot on improving his own, lethalness in the matchup. But I would say he doesn't often find that exact time to strike when he needs to. And that has been a part of the problem is why he keeps losing against Clem. Or he tries to, and then actually it's a humongous concave and it utterly fails. Like maybe this one.
Yeah.
Oh my god, 8 seconds before the upgrades are done too. Not that it would have mattered. This was a clobbering.
That it was. It's kind of funny. We talked about Spirit. Yeah, he's not a timing-based Terran. He has these timings that he can try to take advantage of, but he's the rock that the ocean washes upon up until the point where the ocean runs out of water. That's what that's how he tries to play. And unfortunately, well, Clem is fed by some large rivers. The ocean is never going to run out of water, and at this point, Clem right up the gullet here. Spirit just lost. He has 3 tanks to 8. He lost almost every single tank of that push. And when we talk about supplies lying, supplies maybe not being as relevant as TVT and others, generally that's because of the tank count, because tanks do such a good job of defending. But when you are 3 tanks to 8 here, the third base just dies, that everything is going to go down. Clem going in for Spirit, going in for a Masters round. Actually, wait a second here. Is he going to be able to clean this up? It's 15 dead SCVs. He loses the base. He's got one going down the bottom side. I think Clem cancels this too. At the very least, Spirit takes a great... Oh, he's not going to be able to cancel it. Spirit takes a great fight, Zombie Grub, but at this point, losing your third base like that, feels like you gotta go do something on the other side of the map.
Yeah, exactly. He still took that damage. 16 SCVs isn't too bad because he does still have 3 bases, with this 4th being up and his 5th completing as well, actually. But yeah, the 3rd CC is still a dramatic loss of income. So you do want to get some revenge done. But the good news is he didn't let that kill him. He got his own very good surrounds. He will again have a potential upgrade timing. It didn't matter in the last battle. Clem's 2-2 didn't even finish during it. It just didn't matter. He was already in such a great place. But it might matter for the upcoming battle, especially as Clem is also already moving over into Ravens. So he's got more resources and units that might not be on the front lines, or honestly are very difficult to use. They may just run over the Marines and die themselves. But if he takes the battle as he would like, Clem that is, and then he also has his own upgrades, well, the more Ravens that he's getting here will add into a better army, used correctly, and we assume he uses them correctly. 3-3 finishes for Spirit. Let's see if he actually uses this to attack in the 30 seconds that he has of an upgrade lead. If he doesn't, then he is simply said fallen behind on the end game TVT. He has not added on his own starports. He didn't even actually go up to 8 racks. He's only on 6, so it's not like he's decisively going into more of like a Beyond. Okay, there we go. There's the decisiveness. So he is Beyond versus Mara right now. 8 racks versus triple starport. But the triple starport happened even faster than the 8 racks did, which doesn't feel very good to say. And his upgrade lead is no longer going to be in effect in about 15 seconds.
That, and by the way, Clem's got +2 on the tanks. Only +1 for Spirit. These Marines are going to get evaporated.
Whoa,
Marines
really?
versus +2 tanks. Attacking into this? Really? Absolute. No way. I don't know what he saw there that made him want to go take that fight.
So many of the tanks that Clem run siege. I think that's what he saw. But yeah, no. If it was any different path that he was going to go through, abso-freaking-lutely, because those tanks, a lot of them were on siege. If he had a big concave able to envelop them, I think that would have been great, but it wasn't. It was the worst choke he could find on this map. Very unfortunate, and now Spirit is found out of position totally and entirely this time around. He doesn't have the Ravens to come in to help disable those tanks in the same position that nearly killed him minutes ago. And once again, his 3rd base is going to go down. It actually never got replaced. It wasn't in the middle. It does.
Yeah, and now you're talking about chokes here. Clem, we saw just a little bit ago, very intentionally mined out every single mineral on that wall, so he's not going to get caught in a choke, something like that. That choke still exists for Spirit. It's really hard for him to go, but now he's actually peeled the rocks down again to try to find this big surround, saying, you may take my base, but I'm going to try to take the fight here. Tanks go down, certainly, but Marines are going to be able to get out for the time being. Vikings get out, Ravens get out, and the next round of reinforcements coming in from Clem. Last time this happened, Spirit bought himself a ton of time. He killed a lot of Clem's army. Clem has a 50 supply lead. Clem's got +2 for his tanks, +1 armor on the way, +3 soon. All of a sudden, we're hitting these upgrade breakpoints where Spirit, yeah, he's going 8 racks Marine. He doesn't have the economy at the moment. Yes, there are more bases on the way. They're not here right now. He doesn't have the economy to support 8 racks Marine. And even with a +3, if you're sitting on Stim Marines, +2 tanks one-shot them. They go away. So Clem at this point with the better tech, the better economy against an opponent that's trying to play the, I'm going to trade worse, but I'm going to have more stuff. That's never a good place to be for Spirit.
One last breakout attempt, but I fear this will not go particularly well. you know, if it was an otherwise even game, maybe that's okay. But nope, Clem is going to 2-0. And I do want to kind of correct myself / elaborate. You know, I said he didn't choose the 8 racks as of yet. You brought up he didn't have the minerals for 8 racks towards the end. It was also why he didn't have 8 racks to begin with. Like, he wanted to go 8 racks when he probably got that 6th racks, I'm guessing. And that's probably also when the 3rd CC died. So even though Spirit was never dead in this game and even got a couple of really good jabs himself, it did feel like Clem was doing very important breaking up of the pacing of him. You know, Spirit never really got to do everything he wanted to do, be on the map like he wanted to be on the map, have the 8 racks and, you know, going with that momentum like you would do, so that by the time he actually does get to an 8 racks, it actually looks kind of weird because you're like, what are you really doing with that 8 racks? It's inferior technology that is entirely dependent on having that momentum, being able to take out the map, and hopefully having those upgrade leads, and you have none of that by the time you actually have 8 racks. And it's all that disruption that Clem was throwing at him that really impacted the way the game finalized anyway. Like, Spirit never got the game he wanted, and Clem is just too good. Again, one of those matchups where you could argue there's times where Spirit is even in the better position or has a really good chance, or, you know, is doing a totally fine TVT game himself. But there's something about Clem that makes everything look like it's going to fall flat in its face, and then it does.
Yeah, the other interesting thing as well is, like, when you talk about these two players and you remove the nameplates, right? And granted, TVT is its own beast, and when we talk about how players stylistically play, there's always some variance there. But if I'm removing the nameplates, I'm saying, wow, Spirit strikes me as this guy that would go triple starport, heavy tank, right? Just this very defensive style. We talk about being the rock that Clem breaks himself upon, whereas Clem would be the Beyond guy, the 8 racks, the 10 racks, just force feeding bio all over the map until someone gets broken apart. Now, clearly that's not what happened, and I think probably if you are a favorite in TVT, if you are more comfortable, if you're the favorite in the matchup, going into that more steady, stable Mass Raven late game is a really good way to secure that you win, because we talked about it, +2 tanks evaporate Marines, anti-armor missile makes them die even faster. So even if you're in a good spot, you can suddenly lose 70 Marines in the span of 2.5 seconds and lose a 1 game. I understand that, but it is interesting to see Clem play the more defensive style, more positioning-based style as the game goes later.
I think Clem has done a lot of things to improve his TVT, but one of the things that he really tried to work on years ago at this point was trying to be a better mid and late game player, I think. Because he's always been very good in the early game, and he really loves the micro. And even though back in the day when his worst matchup was this, he had bad micro, actually. It was still something you could tell that he was like generally good at. But then maybe he would lack the wisdom, I suppose, that Mara would have going into the mid and late game. So he even started playing like only late game to really get a lot of practice in it. So now it's not one of those things where you're like, well, Spirit forced Clem to play an uncomfortable game, so maybe he can do that again. No, Clem is totally comfortable playing that type of game, which is why he did it. And most importantly, he does everything he does now with a lot of confidence. There is no hesitation for what he chooses to do, whether it's 8 racks or 3 starport. But yeah, can't put too much praise on this guy, I guess. In the bottom right, up 2-0, he is Clem.
And the upper left, looking to see maybe, just maybe, he looked better in game 2 than in game 1. Maybe he can snatch a victory in game 3. It's Spirit.
Never really got the chance to take hold of the game and carry forth with that momentum. There was one good engagement from him, I would say. There was the surround on Clem's push into his 3rd that was a good engagement, but he'd already lost the 3rd. So, you know, that still kind of sucks, especially when you are trying to get that steamroller going. You know, you're trying to get the train actually going, right? It's basically revving up, and then it wasn't actually allowed to go full speed to push the DeLorean to go back to the future. It just wasn't allowed. The 3rd CC died, and then Clem took control over the map with a, frankly, superior army. I mean, you can really say, in theory, the army of Clem's is superior. It's the positioning and willingness to sacrifice many bodies of units that gives the 8 racks a chance to really win. That just never could happen. So Clem, I mean, he wins kind of in the early game. Game 1 is over pretty fast. He wins in the late game, and I don't see that really changing. I don't know if Spirit's going to have some type of better mid game that he can show, but he is going to have to change things up or just simply play a better game. I mean, I don't want to say that Spirits can't go toe-to-toe with Clem in a typical Marine tank versus Marine tank situation. It just at this point, Clem is so good at the matchup that it never seems to go well enough for our boy in blue.
Yeah, and you talk about Clem just building the better army. It's true. But the entire point of that style that Spirit never got to, which is kind of the funny thing, is you understand that that's how Yun wants to play this, right? You understand that your army is never going to trade better, but theoretically, it gives you a ton of map control. Marines, medevacs are so much faster around the map that you can drop everywhere and snipe bases because there are only so many spots that a tank can hold and make that happen. And, you know, suddenly you find yourself up 8 bases to 5 and, well, suddenly the trades don't matter because your opponent just can't reinforce in the same way. But as you point out, Clem is so good, much like MaxPax was in that last series. So good at figuring out whatever their opponent wants to go for and disrupting it every single step of the way. You don't get to go and get to late game 8 rack, 10 racks, 12 racks, 8 base, whatever it is style without earning it. And Clem makes it so hard to get there that, I don't know, it feels really hard for now though. Second Cyclone, Medevac on the way. Clem, Zombie Grub, we shouldn't be surprised, but there's Drop Micro on the way.
Yeah, it's just a solid opener. You know, I know not every Terran does it every single TVT, but for Clem, I think he really views it as a solid opener, one that will not ever disappoint him. That's mostly true, actually. But Spirit has also kind of changed things up once again. We got actually both of them, little change up, both reactoring out Cyclones. Glad to see that still here. So the Cyclone battles will commence. Who has the better micro? Who's anticipating further Cyclones is also a question, since it's not every TVT nowadays. This is awkward. Spirit, with a very nice timing, comes in before those extra 2 Cyclones, kills so many SCVs, and I'm not sure that Clem is going to get that return damage. He does find his opponent's Cyclone in a much more awkward position, and actually that second lock-on from Spirit on the Medevac will not fully get the kill, missing the chance to perhaps kill that one Cyclone from Clem, but the hot pickup also coming in. Grenades could be thrown down. Reaper pickup as well. Come on now. And that will finally be the end of the aggression. But is that a Warp Prism? I swear to God, he makes it look like it has range on a pickup.
Just that good. I love watching Clem here because you look at things like, oh, this should be good for the non-Clem player, right? This should be good for the non-Terran. I guess Spirit's a Terran here. Generally, there's no way that you defend that. It's going to be great. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. And then you just see Clem. He's like, yeah, no, I am. Not only am I going to make sure that I win a fight that no other Terran player wins, I'm going to be macroing behind it, and I'm going to be redeveloping my economy or taking a third base or adding more structures or doing whatever it is that I want to do. And you're like, surely Clem can't be looking at every angle all the time. But no, he absolutely is. And I was about to say, you know what, look, you joke, wow, Spirit got 7 SCVs. Now the game has been equalized. Now we're playing an even game into the mid game because that's what it takes to take down Clem. And then Clem just does it into a bunch of Cyclones. And you're like, well, okay, I guess we don't have that storyline anymore, do we?
Well, the new storyline is if Clem's dedication to Cyclones can reward him with a bust of a natural or a contain of the third, because Spirit does have a much faster third. He is going into the superior unit, the tank, a little bit faster, but Clem has 8 Cyclones, and most importantly with those 8 Cyclones, he has 2 Ravens with the Interference Matrix. This takes out the budding tank count. And so then Spirit just has less factor units and not much else. You're pretty much dependent on factor units at this point in TVT. Yeah. So this is really concerning. I mean, this could actually win the game, even if these Cyclones of Spirit kill 20 SCVs. If Clem kills the tanks, what else does Spirit have? He even is lacking a Raven now because it went for auto turret harassment. This is a huge potential problem. Those tanks should not be a part of this fight. They actually get 1 shot, which I don't think was supposed to happen. And an auto turret there from Spirit as he realized those Ravens were gonna shark for that particular interference matrix. Now we just have a drop in the main. So it actually looks like this will not be an abrupt ending, but Clem is still finding damage, whereas Spirit really didn't find as much damage as I thought he would with his harassment. He's the one now losing out on the work account.
And you want to know the big line of demarcation? Well, unfortunately, Clem loses the medevac, so these Cyclones are on a one-way trip. But the clear line of demarcation between Spirit and Clem in this game, Spirit lost both Cyclones. in the main base there. I don't think he lost the medevac either, but he did lose his Cyclones on the harass off Marines and I guess STV pulls and things like that. So yeah, Clem, that doesn't really happen to him. Spirit does lose that counter drop potential, and even as damage was done and Clem maybe didn't end the game, he still builds himself a worker lead. He still is up 7 workers. Stim just a little bit slower. The big story, and we talked about this last game a little bit, +1, +1. Actually going to be a 20 seconds ahead for Spirit in this game. His E-bays were done a little bit faster. Clem, despite having his his E-bays done, waits 5 seconds before that. But Zombie Grub, it's really not the 1-1 timing for the most part. 1-1 versus 0-0, where we see this big bio differential, but it's 2-2 versus 1-1, 3-3 versus 2-2. We told this story last game, and it didn't really matter.
No, it didn't. It did not, and I don't think the difference of the 1-1 here is going to matter. There is always the important difference of combat shields versus no combat shields. But that also didn't matter, so I don't think... Well, this time, third CC not going to happen. I'm going to take about half of its health is lost there. The Cyclones are still so helpful, actually. They're still so good at buying time and scouting and being out on the map. Usually, in a different type of game, more Cyclones, less tanks could provide a problem as far as Spirit's ultimate push. And the Cyclones don't feel as useful, but that's not the type of game. This game is certainly close enough, and Clem is close enough on the tank count that his Cyclones are just free map control. But they can't see everything, and so the double medevac drop of Spirit will get unloaded. That is actually very, very nice, but not if he loses third CC. Is he paying attention? He's trying to micro his units in the natural and main of Clem. He does get a repair, thank goodness. That guy just...
Finally, he gets something, yeah, but even still, right? It's not perfect. Clem somehow, despite everything, still has a worker lead because the site we talked about, yeah, you know, Spirit goes, he gets the drop. It's actually not handled all that well for Clem at the moment. He gets a bunch of workers, but Clem still has a Liberator in the main base. He's denying mining there. He's getting the occasional worker there. And you know, I think more importantly, actually his STB production was a little bit hotter. So Cyclones will go down, certainly. Clem will lose 15 SCBs, but this is where it gets scary. Zombie Grub attacking through the natural, shut down on one of these tanks, 3 tanks on the ramp, but you gotta get them closer. There's still a tank right here, and tanks far away. Yeah, they zone, they don't kill.
There's no combat shields for Clem. That was the really scary thing right there when he stemmed in and then had to evacuate. Combat shields will finish very soon, and it looks like Clem is not going to take catastrophic damage on his bases, but yeah, he is on the ropes at the very least. He is a 13 worker lead, so if he survives, he's going to have a great economy. One of the biggest reasons, absolutely, that Spirit is so far behind is because the third CC never got to producing. It was always so harassed. And this is a bit too much of a chase for Clem. He does want to track the army and have his tanks always in position, obviously, but he can't really chase after such as that. Now everything is even Stevens on the upgrades. It's just a matter of finding the positioning of your opponent.
Now, Clem's armory is very far behind, so technically Spirit could open up a window later on, but he's not going for it right now. Tries to get on top of this tank. I don't hate it. Really good pressure on the third base, and we talked about, well, Clem's been able to mine off that third base. He's been able to produce off that third base. This attack from Spirit with the shutdowns on the Raven, that's only 1 tank available, and finally Spirit fights back. A little bit awkward, kind of dicey, but Spirit takes the fight, and we actually have a series.
Yeah, nicely done. Just, I mean, handling all of the back and forth harassment is really nice, and you know, keeping a calm head during it and just making sure that your macro is working out. But then getting across the map without much disturbance, actually, after clearing out the Cyclones and then finding that no combat shield shot, that actually, it was probably going to snowball no matter what, but then we also had the effect of all of those weakened Marines. The medevacs popped and immediately ran out of juice because all of the Marines were injured. So that also drastically affected how that final battle looked, but it seemed like Spirit had already gotten a bit of a chokehold, and Clem's aggression didn't work out as much. It killed a lot of SCVs, but then the classic problem of economy versus army, the army went out that time.
Yeah, and it's funny, I was looking at that game and my mind was breaking just a little bit because I'm like, okay, this is 14 dead SCVs for Clem. This should be an economic advantage for Clem. And then I kept looking down. I'm like, well, is the Liberator getting a lot? It's killed 4 SCVs. And somehow, despite Spirit killing 15 and Clem killing 4, the gap between Spirit and Clem was opened up wider in Clem's favor. Which felt very weird to see, but you're right. That's really key to point out. The third base was continuously producing in a way that really was not for Spirit. But sometimes when you commit so much to the aggression and so much to the harassment all over the place, and most importantly, you spend a lot of Raven energy to make that harass happen, to dive into the main base and really start to get all these SC or try to get this economic damage. Well, suddenly the Ravens from Spirit have a lot more energy than yours do, and you can you mentioned that, yeah, you get across the map, you can just wedge your way in there, and all of a sudden tanks are your Raven there, your opponent has more energy than you do. It becomes a problem. And now, Zombie Grub, we're going to get on to Amphion for Game 4. And the reason I bring this map up in particular is because Clem lost a game to Battlebee in TVT on this map. Now, I'm not going to say that Clem is weak on the map necessarily, but we have seen him lose a TVT on it in this very tournament.
Yeah, okay. It is difficult to point to the map as the problem in a mirror matchup, but you know, it is possible, especially if it's a unique map, which some of these new maps are. And then it, despite it being out for like a month at this point, you can still have a little bit of that hesitation as far as, oh, that AI went that way and didn't go that path that I thought it would, or, oh yeah, I forgot that wasn't traversable, or whatever it is. You can still have a little bit of that, especially if it's not a map they often play, because so many of the series, I would say, StarCraft 2 players play are best of threes. You know, I think I can be confident in saying most of them are going to be best of threes, not best of five. So you have a lot of maps that don't even make it into your tournament practice. But yeah, I'm just going to say that Battlebee probably just popped off. He is a
it was pretty cool.
he's like a young gun, you know, like he can actually fire pretty fast and, you know, be kind of scary, but then maybe doesn't have a lot of bullets, I suppose, in his gun, right? So he's like bam 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 bam. Okay, did I win? If he didn't win, then he doesn't win.
So what I'm hearing here is he's got to hit the range, right? You know, you got 6 bullets, got to hit 5 of them or whatever it is to take down.
Yeah.
You only hit 4, something like that. I don't know.
Something like that. But Spirit also has that chance to pop off against Clem, which is exactly what he just did. But nonetheless, we still have the guy up 2-1 in the top left. It is Clem.
And his opponent popping off. Let's see if he can do it again. Send us to game number 5 for Navi. Atus Vincere. It's Spirit.
And I wish I had paid more attention to the barracks timings actually in that last game, because we also did have in the second game, I believe, faster barracks production by X amount. Not too much, but enough to make the Marine discrepancy there. And I do wonder if that was also the case in the second game. But it was also, again, I pointed out in this PvP, but if you don't have anything scouting, that's terrible. The incoming push, that's absolutely terrible. If you don't have something that's hopefully also buying time with it, that's also not ideal, right? Not that there is something Clem could have bought time with, but if he had been able to see that the incoming attack was from the right down the middle into his natural, then maybe his army is more on the high ground, where Spirit kind of was able to like inch ever closer to it. And then it's one less tank that's killed by that interference matrix, one less stim for the Marines as they desperately try to cover for it so that they don't have to be healed up, and so on and so forth. But it was going to be a little tricky for Clem to hold on because he had so much less army supply. A lot of SCVs, but not enough army supply. And now we have Spirit going to go ahead and go for 1 Rax expand. No second gas, as Observer was pointing out. Whereas Clem is going for a very safe factory opener. It's only safe, but it also gives you maybe a little more options as well. And since he does love his drop, I assume that's what it's going to be for. We're going to go into a drop. We're going to abuse this air situation going on Amphion. Funny supply depot placements. I guess we all got to copy that now.
Yeah, just the Reaper, right? You don't want the Reaper to show up in your main base. Give them
yeah,
one
it's just one supply depot out there in the natural, but that is where the Reaper hop-up is.
In general, just the natural on Amphion is super weird, right? But for now, we're going to see SCV lead. So Clem wins this fight. Marine's going to have to show up here. Grenade going to be able to force him back. So Clem does win the fight in terms of HP, but with the Marine popping out defender's advantage, it's a beautiful thing. So that's going to be fine. Bunker on the way of the nat. Actually, you know what? This makes sense, right? This is a Reaper expand. You're not going to have as much tech level early. You do need that bunker going down. But Amphion, again, we talked about this. This is a weird map. The natural is absolutely massive. It's a ton of dead air, effective dead air spaces. Nice trap on the high ground here. Spirit not going to get the Reaper, but does force it back. there's a lot of dead airspace on the left side. It is certainly something, if you are a Terran player that loves your drops, and we talked about it, Clem absolutely does, you would expect this map to be in your wheelhouse. But again, you can do weird stuff.
Yeah. The fact that you don't have anything that can be sent to the path of air, I guess, you know, it is disturbing. You know, Zergs get overlords, so they're not as disturbed by it, but even they can be really annoyed by such a situation because the Marines can hop off and, you know, in and out and be protected by the mineral wall. Exactly. But I will say that the one thing this map at least tried to kind of counterbalance that with is that the main base, the minerals aren't up against the abusable dead space. So sometimes on maps, the minerals are right up against like the corner, for instance, and the corner on this map still has a ton of dead space, but right behind the minerals, not a lot of dead space. Our observer showing us right now. So you can bother them on the left corner and keep your medevac there and nana boo boo, but you're not actually very close to hitting the SCV line. Not as much of a talking point usually for TVT as much as it maybe is for like Oracle harassment and PvZ, but still a talking point. Like there's been some attempt to try and make, you know, drops not completely abusive or air completely abusive, I suppose. Spirit in very good position regardless, so nicely done, already taking care of the main base. Reapers in the natural will find 2 SCVs before dying.
Well, the problem right now is the Cyclones have to go deputized off to the natural, which means in the main base, Clem maybe gets a little bit more, but target fire is not there. I think he lost an SCV, lost a Marine or two, but you're kind of fine with that because remember, Spirit when Reaper expand, Clem went for the barracks, double gas, factory, which is a build that is popular because it's middle of the road. Keeps you safe, allows you to be greedy, macro enough, but if you have an opponent that goes one side or the other, and they do get away with it, which right now Spirit has. He's up a worker or two. He's lost a couple, but he's still reaping the rewards of this earlier second base. Well, Spirit's going to be very happy in this game. This is the type of game that he wants to play. He's getting into the mid game. He's not taking game ending or even just game defining damage from the Cyclones and whatever else it is that Clem decides to drop through. And now, well, Cyclones on the other side of the map. Interference Matrix on the way. His stim much faster than Clem's in this game. Is it gonna matter? We've seen it twice now. It hasn't really impacted it. The gap here is even broader than it was in game 3, in game 4, or in game 3, in game 2.
Yeah, once again, much faster stim. Also, haha, gotcha. Wow, that didn't die. Dang. Cyclones, what happened to you? All right, well, he still got him. You know, that's still a good feeling at the very least, even if he didn't kill a medevac. But yeah, going into the nitty-gritty details of the change-ups of the build orders. Yeah, Spirit had that 1-Rex expand, and that gives you about a 2 to 3 worker lead. 2.5, 3, whatever. But it does require very little for the factory expand player, I think, to kind of catch up. You do kill 3 SCVs, that's kind of enough. He is still behind by 1, but then you get a faster 3rd CC, because there's a lot more confidence in your macro beyond your aggression, because your aggression is also doing a lot of scouting. So you get that, and then as far as the stim timing goes, well, that has been a reoccurring theme in their macro games, and well, one time Clem had no problem dealing with the later combat shields is really what makes the big difference. But then one game he had a terrible time dealing with it. That did affect his ability to try and stall out Spirit's push. Once again, Spirit getting the jump on Clem's abuse of this land. It's going to force out the auto turret to the very least and maybe make Clem think again. Will certainly take away the 2-pronged attack potential as these Cyclones try to go into the natural, but a very well-placed tank limits their harassment. This time around, Stim might be much faster for Spirit. Upgrades or not. That is finally a difference in favor for Clem here.
Yeah, and the problem as well is Spirit's E-base were well timed. He just had the E-base sitting there. I guess he didn't have the gas for it, building other things, so while he could have been well-timed, well, he could have been, actually, I think, ahead of Clem a little bit, certainly much closer to even. It's not going to happen. This is a moment where Spirit's going to have to sit back and defend. But Zombie, I love the cat and mouse game we're seeing here. Is now the Cyclones are maybe going to get this supply depot getting a little bit more. But Spirit just has, he's not even going to get it. I love that we've been seeing, oh, he's going to get the medevac too. Very nice there. I was going to say, I love what we're seeing with the Cyclone drops, where it's just been Spirit's been waiting for Clem to move out and try to make something happen. But now we got pressure from Spirit. He's up he's down 10 SCVs, but up about 10 army supply. Gonna try to knock these rocks down, but with 1-1 done soon, stim done for both sides. Ravens here set up for Clem. I understand the idea from Spirit. I really do, right? You have this earlier second base that should be able to bolster you into a more powerful mid-game timing, even if Clem's been greedy on the backside. But attacking through this area, this doesn't really feel like the play.
It's not the play currently, but the fact that he has map control means that he can play around with it. And, you know, finding units out of position is really critical to a positioning-based game that is TVT with tanks. Both of them just disabling each other's tanks, so nothing's happening on the front line, I suppose. Cyclone's going for some harassment. We'll find more SCVs. At this point in time, the SCV count has evened up. And it looks like actually 2 tanks of Clem went down. Sorry, I thought that it was a even Stevens on the disables. It was not. My bad. That's huge. He's only down to 1 tank against 5 of Spirit.
We saw right there is oh, that's a great anti-armor missile as well. 1-1's that we talked about the timing lead doesn't really matter here because, well, 1-1's done both sides. Anti-armor much faster. Spirit. There were a bunch of things to talk about this game, but Spirit gives us no opportunity, and we go to game 5.
We do. Yeah, it's very interesting. I wish I had more time to actually watch the replay because I was paying attention to the barracks timing this time. The barracks timing actually was 1-3-5 for Clem. He had 5 barracks at the end. Spirit went 1-2-3, but obviously faster stim. And then he still didn't even have his 2 barracks finished, but he had about a 15 Marine lead, I think, just because maybe his Marine production started faster and more consistently, I suppose. And then it otherwise doesn't feel like that uneven of a game. You're like, yeah, okay, that's there, but you know, they both have Ravens, they both have tanks. Difference advantage. No one really lost a tremendous amount or was especially greedy compared to the other guy. But then twice now, Spirit's attack looks much better. And I'm actually not quite able, maybe I am rusty, but I'm not quite able to pinpoint exactly what is going so wrong for Clem's defense in these last 2 games.
There was one really
paid
cool
attention to the last one.
There was one really cool thing that Spirit did. So we were kind of laughing about the game of chicken they were playing with the interference matrix on the tanks. It's like, okay, this should trade evenly. Once the interference matrix was done kind of for one on both sides, Spirit had enough energy on his Ravens that he didn't interference another tank again. Well, he did, but he also interference matrix the high energy Raven, which meant that all of a sudden, instead of this being even, he killed a ton of the tanks. And maybe that didn't matter as much in the final fight because it really was the Marine stim on top that did things at the end. But that allowed him, you mentioned it at the end of the fight, he had 5 tanks to 1. Well, he killed 2 for 0 right there. That was actually because I think his Ravens were out a little bit earlier. I'm not certain on that one, but that would explain the energy differential. Maybe an auto turret was dropped somewhere as well. But if it's 5 tanks to 1, all of a sudden here, that gives you so much more confidence to stim in because, well, all of a sudden you have this big tank lead that you can rely on.
Yeah, and he got such a good tank lead just from the beginning, even before he killed the tanks. So you're absolutely right to call out that matrix on that 1 high energy Raven. That was definitely very, as that probably was the reason he didn't get the counter disables. That just makes it a stalemate. And then, but that's like all of his tanks killed, and he's less on Marines, and an otherwise very even game. They went for a similar enough opener, right? It was 1 X Factory expand, but then it was the Cyclones and the drop as the emphasis. And then a similar number of Ravens. I guess, you know, what happens maybe is that if Clem is allowed to live a bit longer, he might not have as many tanks because of just the way the production went around, but he probably has this very superior Marine power and then carries that superior Marine production with momentum and then maybe wins like he did in game number 1 or game number 2, actually, game number 2. But I think what that attack that Spirit's doing is hitting Clem when he still doesn't have like that many tanks, but he also hasn't really reaped the rewards of having all 5 production facilities. So to give that guy an extra 45 seconds and a couple of more rounds of 5 racks with 4 reactors, and he probably has enough Marines alongside combat shields actually done to combat any attempt to jump on him if his tanks are taken out of the equation. But it's happening at a time where he is just lower on army. There's no benefit, but his infrastructure would reward him if he could just live. But he's not living. So, I mean, that's my current theory as to what's going on here. But, you know, it really is a a turnaround from the first 2 games. We were talking, lavish praise of Clem and how well he does in every single department of this game. And I was like, well, mid game, I guess, is where it's not been kind of proven who's the better one, but I would guess it would be Clem. No, it's Spirit. Spirit is particularly abusive in this mid game. The not exactly first tank push, but kind of the first big tank push is successfully killing Clem. So now we really got to discuss, does Clem have a problem? Does Clem have this one particular timing that just like he's not ready to deal with? Can Spirit exploit this in one of the most important tournament plays that he's been able to do? Like, that'd actually be really sick. It'd be very fortunate, maybe. I don't know if I want to put it down the luck, but Spirit 3-2ing Clem in the upper bracket round of 4, that'd be amazing. He has such a poor win record against the guy otherwise.
Part of it could be going into this series, Clem had lost his last 5 maps. Granted, TVP, but, maybe he's not feeling all that great. I don't know. The other thing I think we got to talk about here is maybe Clem's just being a little bit too greedy, right? We're seeing him every time Spirit makes this fight happen, and Clem's up like 10 to 15 SCVs, even if he's taking damage. And it's like, well, you're 10 SCVs is 500 minerals. That's a decent amount of Marines that maybe is slowing something down elsewhere. Obviously, in a mid game, and maybe I'm thinking about this too much like a ZVZ, but obviously in the mid game, you'd like to say, hey, we want to go and I want to have this economy. But if your opponent can catch you right as you're getting yourself that economy set up and you cut workers for it, that's maybe another thing we got to pay attention to. For now, though, it's Side Delta, it's map 5. We're going to let the players explain things because we are ready to go.
All right, top left, we do have Navi's Spirits.
And the bottom right in the red. He took the first 2 very quickly, but now on the back foot. Let's see if he can strike back. It's Clem.
Spirits emphasizing production, getting that army supply lead, and actually able to deliver the killing blow. Because that's so often what the problem is that we'll see. There's even Ryung used to do this 2 base all in, but it had a 3rd CC. He just had a fake 3rd CC. It was like the fake Nexus of old or something, where he didn't build any SCVs. He was at 44 SCVs, and he would all in. And it was really deceiving because you don't expect that from a Terran, and, the 3rd orbital lands on location. You're like, okay, that's a 3rd, right? And he doesn't do it. But then he doesn't always win those TVTs, because even if you do cut workers and really emphasize production to kind of make like a pseudo 2 base all in, you still have to break through tank lines and Raven control and whatever else gives defender's advantage to a Terran, which is usually really difficult. So you do it once, but then you can't replicate it. And so the fact that Spirit's not even doing that drastic of a cut, he's not faking a 3rd base here, but still is able to get that pinpoint pressure. Well, it bodes very well, because if he can continue to exploit that, then that is him winning this, turning the series around 0-2 to 3-2. And that would be a pretty cool story for him. He's once again gone into the factory expand, but then so has, the 1-Rex expand, but then so has Clem. Clem, though, is doing something peculiar. 2nd Rax coming down after his factory, so he is actually going to kind of sneak in like a 2-1-1. And the default assumption from Terran players when we face each other is that we're all going 1-1-1. And it's maybe a question of when does our 3rd CC come down, what's producing from the factory, what's producing from the starport. But the 2-1-1, that's not off of an in-base 2-Rax as well, because the 2-Rax Reaper opener that can exist can go into a 2-1-1 as well. But if it's not even that, then there's a strong chance that Spirit doesn't realize what's going on, especially if his aggression is deflected, assuming that he does go for a medevac drop here. But yeah, that's kind of now the question. Does Spirit realize what Clem's build is? Or does Clem get away with it, I suppose, this faster 2nd barracks, faster aggression?
Yeah, and it's funny, when I looked at this map, okay, we're inside Delta, game number 5, I kind of had flashbacks to game 1, right, where Side Delta has such nice low ground to high ground siege positions, outside of the main base, on the ramp, on the low ground, where we're seeing Clem take a slightly different aggressive option. I kind of expected more of a 1-1-1 siege tank shove up that we sometimes see, but it makes sense. Clem has been this player that when you let him, say for the first 7 minutes of the game, you let him really lean into this aggression, hit these timings, that is something where Spirit has seemed to struggle. Yeah, in the mid game. Okay, sure. Spirit goes and is able to shove through, take 2 games. but I still think that I favor Spirit in these games where, or Spirit favor Clem, excuse me, in these games where Clem is able to get really aggressive stim on the way. And if we look at build orders here, right? Spirit going back to the Banshee that lost him game 1 against a stim timing. That doesn't feel great.
Well, it's gonna be really awkward. There's a chance the 2-on-1 decides that it's not going to be successful. Something is there that it says, you know what, I'll try again later. So it doesn't immediately speed in and drop all 16 Marines. And in that case, the Banshees might get a really good timing to kill 10 plus SCVs. Well, then Clem is like, oh, no, Banshees, gotta run home. Wait, no, I can't run home. That's not gonna be in time enough, and I don't have a scan anyway. Okay, let's attack. Oh, shit, like another tank popped out. I can't do that either. It can get really weird. As the first game could have gotten really weird. I mean, Banshees can just make a weird game because they are the outlier meta, right? And I am very curious, because this means that Spirit won't get that any type of fast... no, he did see it, actually. I'm totally blind. All right, so yeah, so he knows it's 2-on-1. And now the question is, does he have his tanks in good position? That is basically what you have to do to ensure you do not die to the first 16 Marines. And if he has that, then he can focus on his Banshees and do a lot of damage.
Follow-up question for their zombie grub. So Spirit gets into the main base with the Reaper, doesn't really see anything, and immediately drops a scan. So Clem knows that he's been scouted. Absolutely, he knows Spirit scanned him out. And how does this change how Clem decides to play? How much does he commit? So for now, we saw him pretty quickly go into that third base. And this Banshee, there is no cloak, there is no scan energy. This we talked about, 2-1-1 versus everything else. No, this is a problem right here. Look at this Clem, he's trying to fake it. He's like, okay, I do have a scan now, finally. This Banshee gets out of here.
Oh, annoying. So annoying. But it wasn't the 2 drops evacuating from an attack. It was actually Clem just being very patient with it. He had unloaded them from, in the middle of the map, which was still too bad. That was still so far away. And then he's like, well, I can't do anything with this clearly, so I got to pull back. But then clearly these 16 Marines are not going to be back in time to help out against the Banshee. So it's a mad scramble to try and make sure the Banshees don't do as much damage as possible, which they've been mitigated, certainly. Not the worst problem there. But it does mean that his 2-1-1 was pretty ineffective as far as the opener goes. He'll still have map control. He'll still have faster stim, more Marines for a very long time. But it wasn't the type of pace that I think he really wanted to set. Now the problem for Spirit is actually getting a 3rd CC. That is his upcoming dilemma. And Clem, if he does want to continue succeeding in this game, will want to go ahead and delay that as much as possible. Already setting up a contain into that natural, which can be very difficult to break out of on site Delta, particularly.
Yeah, we talked about that early on, about like the single tank seizing up the natural, but yet a lot more. It becomes that much more difficult. There is a problem brewing for Clem. Again, he's on single eBay. Eventually, unless Clem solves it, this will mean that Spirits, his Marines, are going to be a lot better. But for right now, +1's done for Clem. So that means that, again, one of these fights, that's a lot of burst damage out of your Marines. And I like what Spirit's doing. He's got these Banshees. He can try to find something. Oh, Cyclone's not going to be there. Banshee gets out, even it's on very low HP. He built a 3rd Banshee. This is super cool. If I'm Clem, this rarely happens, so I'm not expecting the one-shot potential. I think I'm safe with the missile turrets and everything else. This is going to be 5 more SCVs going down. Banshee, that Banshee does not want to do anything. But these Banshees are going to find their way out. Looks like Clem again does. Okay, he does have a scan. Banshee takes the wrong route.
Oh, come on.
Come on.
Yeah, that's kind of sucks. But I do want to emphasize here, as we might have an upcoming battle, at least another contain. Usually what would be the advantage of the non-2-on-1 player would be maybe like a faster 3rd CC, but they can't put on location, so that's kind of not the point. But they would have those upgrades that you're talking about. They would also have Ravens. And Ravens would be amazing to have even in these mid battles. Anti-armor missile, disables on the tanks. Usually that's a real technology benefit to the non-2-base player that eventually can be used. But when you do go for the Banshees, you don't have that anymore. You have the Banshees, and if they don't do the surprise maximum amount of damage that they maybe could, then was it really worth it? And I think that is now the question that we're answering, which is that maybe it wasn't. These Banshees, they didn't kill 25 SCVs, they killed 14 over a 2-minute period, 3-minute period, whatever it's been, right? So the only thing Spirit has is the upgrade lead, which is still something. We know how important that is in Marine versus Marine, but he has been significantly on his 3rd CC. He doesn't have quite that technological benefit. He isn't that much higher on the tanks. He just had those Banshees, which didn't do catastrophic damage. But now he's got 2 medevac drops going into the main that might do some severe damage. Looks like he's going to play it safe and just unload.
You know, Zombie Grubby say, look, the third base was a lot faster for Clem. This is good news. Sure, fine. But Spirit actually has, if anything, the income's been equal, and Spirit's actually been mining a little bit more off some fuel spikes. So third base as well here finds a little bit more room. And yeah, 1-1's equal for right now, but Clem, not only was he single eBay versus double eBay, which eventually you solve, you get the second eBay, his factory was much later than Spirit. So you talk about upgrade windows, and maybe Spirit can find them, maybe he can't. This is 45 seconds. This is a massive window that Spirit's going to be able to find, and more importantly than anything else, that window is going to be done right around the same time Spirit maxes out fully. This army that he's building for himself, you're right, there are no Ravens. It's really hard to attack into that number of tanks, but everything is lining up for a massive sledgehammer coming out of Spirit in just about 30, 45 seconds. Like, he's getting, and these Marines are absolutely waylaid. They're just marooned off to the side. Clem is going to be able to pick up some of them, but this is a problem right now. Yeah, oh wait, Medevac's drop goes out, so maybe it's not as bad as I thought it was, but now thinking about stimming onto the high ground here, Tank's maybe not in the position to defend this angle, and Spirit gets the better siege first. Now, can he go further? I don't know, because the tanks are now there. But at the very least, this is a scary position for Clem to try to break.
Yeah, all things considered, with the 2 different openers, Spirit has gotten the lead. You're right, he was actually winning the income war with all of the pull-aways of the SCVs and just consistently dying ones. Spirit has been winning on that front the entire time, and absolutely 100% on the upgrades. He is in the lead, but it is also 3cc versus 3cc, both of them getting to 4 bases, and we know that TVT takes a long time to actually kill each other. And in fact, when this game got like this, very similar to this, with the upgrade discrepancy being the worst thing for Clem still won it. So that should be on Spirit's mind, but then we also have other factors, which, for instance, hopefully Spirit doesn't just lose his 3rd orbital. He doesn't do that, and he goes into 8 racks, and he has this momentum. Then I actually have a lot of hope for him. Clem is not going to be just purely on the defense. I think at one point he will try and push out and just find favor in the positioning as opposed to any upgrades, and then we can see what changes there. He's got double medevac drop also at the top, and funnily enough, they both do. They both have hit squads to the top. Spirit's timing, though, no! What's the opposite of Ehan timing?
I don't even know what Eon timing is, Zombie Grub. I'm sorry.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, get out of here, you pleb. It means perfect timing, and it was screamed by Brood War commentators when there was a timing attack. Anyway, perfect timing for Clem, opposite of perfect timing for Spirit, but then ditto, I guess, on the other side of the map, they both are attacking into bases. However, what the difference is, one tank was prepared, and... Okay, no, that actually was no difference at all. They both protect the bases. Clem did get a cancel, I think, on the 5th, though.
Well, I mean,
oh, Jesus.
Really nice for Spirit here. All the tanks are going to get gunned down so very quickly. And also, you talk about the timing being good or not. That was Spirit's attempted 5th base. So, you know, tanks get traded out. Spirit, yeah, he loses his respective 5th, but his 4th base is well done. It's totally set up where it needs to be. And Spirit is now the one that's not going mass 8 racks, 10 racks, eventually mass bio. He's opting into the faster starports first. He's building that better army. And on a map like Side Delta, Spirit's played some incredible TVTs here. He knows how to constrict the map. Again, this is Clem. Clem is very good at trying to break these boa constrictor arms, but I know you said this happened on the Alcyone game, Zombie Grub, but I really like Spirit's position.
No, it's already so different from that. Clem never got on the other side of the map to do any economic damage, and he just took a battle in which he lost all of his tanks, where, you know, it was a good battle for Spirit into a bad battle where he lost his tanks in the first game, right? So that was also affecting how things were really panning out. No, this has all just been bad news for Clem. Clem has not gotten anything that he wanted to do. He's never been in the lead in the upgrades, which once again is a problem as we're talking right now. And he just had his tanks found out in the middle of nowhere. That was a potentially game-ending move. The game's not quite over because Terrans be Terrans, but it is a potentially game-ending move. His tank count was so abysmal, and thankfully he has 2 factories up, so he's back up to 5, but he still has that upgrade problem. And Spirit is doing 100% the right thing as the follow-up, which is the 3-star port. Liberators are on the way. He could have also done Ravens. Like, any error would have been a good idea, I think. Sacrificial Ravens, get the disables, hopefully win there, or try and win out the Viking Liberator game as well. That can work. So this is just this should be the 1-2-3 punch that wins Spirit the game and the series. that Clem is clawing his way back, and well, Spirit has a pause for some reason.
Yep, he's really the entire tournament he's been struggling with a little bit of lag, so I assume that that's what it is. Just wait for the ping to settle down just a little bit. But the one thing we do have to talk about, if you're a Clem fan and you're saying, give me some hope here, why does Clem have a shot to come back in this game? Because it's looking pretty dire. At the very least, he's got +2 tanks, which means that these 4 positions that it is very hard for Spirit to attack into become that much harder. You can't stim a bunch of Marines into it very easily. We saw it in that fight right before the pause. They get one shot, right? They get taken down. So again, this is not the easiest thing to deal with. Clem still in a rough spot. Spirit's got his 5th base on the way. I don't think we have that. Yeah, we don't have that coming out of Clem. So he's going to be stuck on 4 bases a little bit longer. At the very least, attacking into this core 4 for Clem is going to be very hard up until the point where Viking count is massive and Liberator count is massive. And even then, it's not... Well, Clem also has his 3 starports up, so he can build some Vikings. You have something there.
Yes, he is doing exactly what he should be doing, which I think Maru really perfected, led the way on, which is the never dying Terran. Like, even if you have a substantial lead, as long as you have 3 bases, apparently you can come back from anything. And the trick to that is making sure not to, default lose to the Viking game at the end. So it used to be, I think, years ago in TVT, if you were falling behind, you would go for desperate base trades and doom drops and would lose to the Viking, Liberator, or Raven, whatever popped out. Now, the emphasis is really turtling, getting tanks in the proper position, and then spending the necessary amount of money on Vikings so that you have a chance when it comes to the late game. So Clem knows that as well, but that doesn't mean that he can win it, because he's just lower on the economy, and he's still having trouble on the grounds, especially with his 3-3, still 45 seconds from finishing.
This tank count is just massive. Yeah, they're only +1 versus +2, and actually, we talked about getting up to that mass Viking count. Clem's got the air lead right now. He wins the fight, lands the Vikings, tries to shut down the tank count before the reinforcements are going to arrive. Clem thinks he might be able to make something happen here, and he's absolutely right. Even down 2 upgrades, even with everything going wrong, lands the Vikings, shuts down the tanks, buys more room. The problem is, Zombie Grub, most of those Vikings went down. 6 landed Vikings died, so that air lead that Clem had, now it's 10 Vikings to 3. That was a one-shot breakout. He made it work, but the next one, and the next one, and the next one, not as nice.
Yeah. It is a really important breakout, though, not only to give him some breathing room on his 4th base, which he desperately needed, but then also to try and gain map control, because he knows this is a problem. He knows that there's some type of air on the way from his opponent. He actually doesn't know if it's Ravens or Liberators quite yet, but he should get a vision somewhere on that soon. And either way, the goal would be to never let them get into a comfortable position. So Liberators literally siege units, don't let them siege in your face. That's obvious. Ravens, they don't siege, but you still don't want them on your side of the map. You want them trying to run around and running over your Marines and making mistakes. So Clem really needs to be out on the map. Even to a point that even if his 3-3 wasn't done, he'd still have to posture as if he was confident. Fortunately, his 3-3 is done, so this is just correct all around. But yeah, very important that he broke out when he did, and that he took some room while he could. But the problem is he might still eventually lose the Viking War. And actually was losing it to kind of by 1 Viking there, but wise decision to sacrifice Marines to help out. And we got ourselves a bit of a clobbering match now. Both of them trying to send Liberators to each other, but of course, Spirit has so many, 6 Liberators to 1, both getting some SCV damage. Clem lower on the workers, but even on the army supply, and actually going to try and break out right here. He's going to go for it. Marine Concave. There are a decent amount of tanks, though, with that +2. Can't go chasing very far.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? We had a 45-second pause where, where their cameras were. They were probably on that fight on the north side. But it's so easy to kind of lose perfect position on exactly what the game is, perfect information. So it does get a little bit awkward. Viking count. The fact that Spirit has +1 armor in these Vikings and Clem does not is such a big deal. It's kind of the same situation as Phoenix or Mutas or anything like that, where because, well, Vikings fire 2 shots. Armor applies twice. It is a big deal here. So even though Clem, because of the Liberator production, briefly had Vikings of the same number that Spirit did, that +1 armor is making such a big difference. And reminder, Spirit's on double armory, so he can start to hit +1 attack, +2 armor, really make these Vikings untouchable in the sky. And even as Clem goes and snipes a Liberator here or there, establishes his position, it gets worse, right? +1 air attack of the Vikings are going to get better, make the Liberators that much stronger. You got to keep your Marines under where the Vikings are, and Clemis, he's just not doing that because the Marines are elsewhere. There's nothing stopping these Vikings from chasing everything in the sky and just making it run away.
Yeah, now it's pretty obvious that the Marines must be somewhere else looking for a base trade. You know, it was probably already something he was thinking of, worrying about, but now it's pretty obvious. These are already sim Marines with no medevac support, so they're going to sim again and just have a worse problem. This wasn't the run-by breakout that he was hoping for, because right now, Clem is just desperately trying to find some way to avoid actually tackling this fight, because he's not going to win it. So he has to just dislodge it instead, and dislodging's not working so far. Spirit gets to have a much easier game, I would say, at this point. He just like sieges up, leapfrogs every now and again, and then, you know, plays with his Marines the same way that Clem does, sending them elsewhere while they both battle on siege units.
Yeah, and man, with the Liberators here as well, the tanks can't do anything to defend. Maybe you can pull some SCVs to win the Viking war just to make that mass repair happen, but I mean, this is a significant problem. It's not one that Clem really has an answer to. Liberators siege up on everything. The tanks are just going down. There's nothing to do. This +1 armor tech for Spirit has done so much in this game. And even as Clem has sat here, making it look like he might make a comeback happen after the pause, the long and short of it is Spirit's got a 3K bank. He's got 1,500 gas in the bank. He's got better upgrades for his Vikings. So even as Clem tries to claw his way back and briefly maybe build a Viking lead, this attack from Clem on the other side is going to annihilate a ton of Marines because +2, +3 on the tanks are fantastic. Zombie Grub, I fear at the end of the day, it doesn't truly matter because Clem lost the 4th base. Spirit has an incredible economy, and even if he didn't, that bank is enough to get an economy again.
Absolute kudos to Clem for actually trying to bring this back, though. Been bringing it back for quite some time. And this attack through the middle is just feisty enough to really be causing Spirit some problems. He's been just a few Marines short, a few health points short, a few tanks unsieged short of fully stopping it, which means reinforcements have been interrupted, and he's actually lost some form of control of the map as he has retreated away from the 4th base after successfully killing it. So, I mean, it's a safe retreat. Spirit will absolutely deal with this eventually and still have all 6 bases up and running. He does have that on his side, but actually, this game is kind of even in the most important places, and that is in the army supply, right? So the army is just dependent on where they position are the most important thing, and right now Clem has found positioning, and he still has 5 bases mining, guys. Like, the loss of the 4th and the fact that he's been down maybe 20 SCVs at times has affected his bank. It looked really bad, but then you look at the gas and you're like, it actually wasn't that bad. Spirit's remax was not nearly as fast as you'd have thought if you saw someone with 3,000 minerals. He remaxes basically as fast as Clem does, and now Clem has the map control. Things are starting to turn around.
You know the worst part about this? Zombie Grub is Spirit. He's got to find a way to break this because Clem built the Viking lead. Somehow he made it happen. I guess he took some trades, and Marines versus Vikings made it happen. And now, because of where Clem is sieging, the base is important. It absolutely is. But the big problem, that's the 2 of the 3 starports. Spirit never developed his production any more than that. He cannot. He's rebuilding the 2 starports. Sure, but look at what he's building. He's building more barracks. He's not going to be able to go and counter this Viking, this Liberator count anymore. He's trying to go on top of the bottom right side, gets a couple tanks right there. But Clem's reinforcements are doing a great job. And a minute ago, I was like, yeah, I counted him out. But this actually fight coming in from Spirit seems like it's going to go pretty nicely. Tanks are going to get shut down, and Vikings matter in the sky, certainly, but only if they're buying room for the Liberators. They're not sieged. Look at this break from Spirit. All of a sudden, it was looking good and bad and good again. And Spirit, this is the upset. Top 4 in the upper bracket. Look at that.
Yeah, amazing result from Spirit, okay? Like, I do want to say that first and foremost. Not just taking down a guy who he basically never takes down, but then also reverse sweeping. 0-2 to 3-2. And